Better Daily, where we work hard in our minds, bodies, and our spirits to become 1% better every single day. Download the app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.live to catch the video version of these podcasts. Here's your host and my dad, Alex Van Houten.
What is up, Betterment family? This is Alex Van Houten in Better Daily Live. Happy Thursday. It's Word Thursday, and Word Thursday is my favorite day of the week because we get to go through a word and I share some meditations with you, and I love it when you tell me what you think about the word as well and what it means to you. Good morning, Robin. Good morning, Scott. Glad to see you guys. Today's word is the word disease. D-I-S-E-A-S-E, disease. And actually, the etymology of the word goes back a while. Usually when you think of disease, you think of maybe an infection, maybe a genetic disorder, maybe something you're taking pills for, like cardiovascular disease or something along those lines. Good morning, Janet. But the word disease actually goes all the way back to the 12th century, and it's actually D-I-S-ease. Disease is dis-ease. Ease is a state of bodily comfort. You know, things are easy. I feel at ease, right? Disease, dis-ease, is a disruption to that. So the actual definition back in that day was a disruption to bodily comfort. You might think of it as a discomfort. You might think of it as the lack of feeling at peace, usually associated with suffering. So it's a rough word. It's a difficult word, and it's a word that I think about pretty frequently because I have a genetic disorder. It's classified as a disease, Ehlers-Danlos. And of the genetic disorders, I count myself pretty lucky because there are things that people wrestle with on a regular basis that makes what I wrestle with look silly. But the genetic disorder is interesting because it means you can't get away from it. You know, it's baked right into your DNA. If somebody has, for instance, let's say you wrestle with type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a disease. However, it's a reversible disease for most people. When they're being treated with type 2 diabetes, I've helped many people reverse type 2 diabetes. That means to get the blood sugar stable, to get the insulin down, to get off medications and whatnot, to lose the weight that is creating such a taxing problem on the insulin system. Cardiovascular disease can also be reversible, depending on what it is that you have going on. I have a client of mine who had atherosclerosis and peripheral arterial disease. That means, you know, he was getting hardening of the arteries, and his capillaries would close up in his legs when he walked around, so he couldn't get very far before his legs started cramping and he had to sit down. I'll never forget, he got on an arc trainer. It's a piece of cardio equipment in the gym. He got on an arc trainer and he lasted 4 minutes. And it was brutal. The poor dude was in so much pain, and I could see his calves seizing up and stuff. And he was like, man, this is terrible. I hate this so much. And about 6 months later, the same guy would get on an arc trainer for 30 minutes before we actually worked out together. That was his warm-up. That was his cardiovascular warm-up. He'd do 30 minutes of arc trainer, and I'd find him, and, he'd go on to a workout because he had reversed the dis-ease. But a genetic disorder is not reversible. You don't get to change your DNA. We're finding there are things that matter more than DNA. I said this in the Better Man Challenge last night, that what you believe about what you've been given in your DNA might actually be more important than the DNA itself. But we'll table that to the side for a moment. I do a lot of meditations on this in particular because for me, it's so important to me that I don't let my disorder be an excuse for not doing things that I know I should be doing, right? So, I get headaches very frequently. Part of Ehlers-Danlos is something called postural orthostatic tachycardia, which is, in layman's terms, means that my blood flow through my arteries and veins, I have a hard time with that. When I stand up, they expand, and so I can lose blood flow to my brain really quick. So if I say anything stupid, I'm going to claim POTS, P-O-T-S, postural orthostatic tachycardia. I'm losing blood flow to the brain. But the artery that goes all the way to the brain, when I stand up, it's supposed to be restrictive. It's supposed to hold the line and allow blood to flow to the head. But instead, in Ehlers-Danlos, it's a little looser than it should be. And so it opens up, and all of a sudden my blood pressure drops pretty significantly in my upper extremities, and it takes time for that to come back. So I wrestle with that, and headaches are a thing. But I don't want, like, I have a headache right now, and everything in me was like, oh man, don't do this live right now. You're going to say weird things, and you know, you might look funny, and it's going to be hard to smile, but this matters. And it matters that I connect with you guys, and it matters even showing up in doing something when you don't feel like doing it. It matters. And I would say the same for you. I'm sure you have a lot of reasons not to pursue betterment today. Whether it's a disease or not. Dis-ease. Remember, disease is not just a pathogen that you catch or something you take pills for. Disease actually comes from the idea that anything that is discomforting and causes suffering in you, that's what dis-ease is. And I would say that in my life, doing things even though you're dis-eased, for me, those are the wins. Because from the outside looking in, maybe it might not look like much to you that I turned on the live here and started talking to you about the 12th century definition of disease. You know, oh well, that's not a win in your book. Like, hey, thanks, Alex, appreciate you showing up. But that's a win in my book. And it's going to be a win in my book later today when I go for a run, even though I probably don't feel like it. And even though my joints are in more pain than they should be, and that's just part of Ehlers-Danlos. And it's so important to me that I don't allow what I wrestle with, my dis-ease, that I don't allow that to become a reason for me not to do the things that I know that I want to do, that I know I should do, that I know other people need me to do. I love playing with my kids. It's so good. It's one of the wonderful, wonderful joys in life. But if I allowed how I felt, my dis-ease, if I allowed how I felt to get in the way of that, then I would be making an excuse as to why I couldn't be the father that I wanted to be. And I meditate on this often because there was a awesome physicist. His name was Stephen Hawking. Very interesting guy. He was working on his PhD, and he started to fall a lot. Then it turns out that Stephen Hawking had ALS. ALS is a brutal disease, and it tears down the body's ability to work at all. It just attacks all the nervous system functions and stuff. And so what happens is people with ALS slowly lose all of their function. And Stephen Hawking actually got to a place in his life where all he could do was move this muscle right here. He can move the top of his eyelid. And yet, Stephen Hawking wrote books, one letter at a time. He had this little camera here, and he'd pick his letter, and then he'd pick his letter, and like 200-page books. I have a book by him in my library called The Brief History of the Universe, and it's such a good book, and the dude wrote it one letter at a time with his eyelid. And one of the things he said, he actually broke his arm once, racing his wheelchair around Cambridge University, I believe it was the university. And the journalist asked him, why do you do this? You know, cause he can't move. He's got one muscle in his eye that works, and he can't move. And he said, I want to show people that just because you're disabled in body doesn't mean that you have to be disabled in spirit. And that's the cool thing about dis-ease, is if you've been through something that is brutal, it's hard, it's difficult, it's very dis-easing, it's discomforting, and there's a lot of suffering associated with it, and yet you show up anyway. Even if from the outside looking in it doesn't look like a win, but if you show up anyway, something interesting happens, and it's contagious. Whatever it is, it's the opposite of dis-ease. It's contagious, and it actually can be set up against dis-ease, because when you do something that is overcoming, it inspires other people to overcome too. You say things like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's not the spirit behind it. It's because that person did that, I can do this, right? Not like my accomplishments are any better or worse than yours, but that because I showed up, maybe you'll show up too. And you know you won't be alone in that. You won't be alone in the dis-ease conquering. You won't be alone in the, I didn't let this be an excuse for me today. Bennett, our 3-year-old, loves this movie called Trolls. And if you don't have little kids, you probably haven't seen it because it's not exactly like, an adult thriller. But there's this really, really interesting scene where there's one troll, her name's Queen Poppy, and she's all cute and bubbly and fun, and nothing can bother her, and that's fun. And Bennett really likes Queen Poppy. But there's this other character, his name's Branch, and Branch is kind of like, he's sarcastic and dark and not very happy, and throughout the movie you're like, what's wrong with this guy? And you find out later that he lost his grandma when he was really young. And so the happy-go-lucky trolls over here who always want to party and sing and stuff, they're happy and they wonder what's wrong with Branch. Well, Branch actually has experienced some difficulty in his life. And I know it's a kid's movie, but there's this really interesting scene, and I think it has something for you. It had something for me anyway. And something happens in the movie where everybody loses hope. And all the color drains out of the trolls. They're all bright. They're purple and orange and red and green and all that. And all the color drains out of the trolls because they're hopeless in this moment. They all lose hope. Like, it's a kid's movie, but everybody's about to die, and they lose hope. And Branch, who's been colorless this entire movie, he actually starts to sing. And, I don't cry in kids' movies, but I get a little sports tear because that image of the person who's been through hell being able to lift everybody else up because all of a sudden now they're going through hell. But it's not a big deal, because I've been through hell several times. It's not that big of a deal. I'll sing. His song brings the color back to everybody and brings back hope because they've never been there. They've never been in disease, but because he's been in disease and can handle it forthrightly and can handle it with a little bit of joy even, they all find some hope. And I think that's a good metaphor for disease. We all have something that we're struggling with, whether it's a diagnosable disease or not. We have all experienced dis-ease. In fact, I think it was the great philosopher Nietzsche that said the only thing real is suffering. And I don't know if I agree with him completely, but he said, you can't refute that. Everybody has been through it. Everybody has gotten hurt. Everybody's been in pain. Everybody's woken up on the wrong side of the bed and been in an awful mood that just wrecks your whole day. We've all been there. But when you show up and you make the most of disease, I think that's contagious. I think it's contagious when we rise above, when we rise to the occasion anyway, and we do things not because we feel great and it's out of the overflow and everything's good. And there's a place for that. And I hope that for you. I pray that for you. But in the moments of dis-ease, when you show up anyway, I think that's contagious. And I hope you'll do it because the world needs more of that. Guys, this has been Alex Van Houten in Better Daily Live with some meditations on Word Thursday on the word dis-ease. Tomorrow is Flex Friday. And we're going to go through something that's going to help you on your 1% journey regarding exercise. Until then, it's just 1%. You got this.
Thank you for joining us for your 1% Better today. Don't forget to subscribe for the podcast. Leave us a raving review to tell others how Better Daily has helped you in your journey. If you want more Better Daily, download our app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.live. Use code POD to get 25% off your subscription. That's POD, all caps, to save 25% on your subscription. We all have a cross to carry. It's lighter when we do it together. Go to betterdaily.live today.